guys, welcome back. We are on our fourth and final video where we are unpacking Grow. This video, we're going to be looking at yearly habits. We're going to be unpacking what that looks like, maybe some ideas about what your yearly habits could be, and just how we're going to be moving forward together in that. So we have talked a lot, Gareth.
We have talked a lot.
about stories.
Yes.
And part of Grow is, this is a framework for discipleship, and we talk a lot about how the story that you live in is the story that you live out, and about competing voices in our lives. And I think one of the stories that is relevant to our yearly habits is productivity. I don't know about you, but I really struggle with feeling valuable if I'm not producing stuff. You know, if I'm not doing anything, I kind of feel like I've just wasted time and wasted the day. So I don't know. How about you? Do you resonate with that at all?
Oh, massively, Faith. Our culture is shouting all the time about this story of productivity, and that actually the things that you produce in our Western culture are what you can measure your worth by. So if you are getting loads done at work, you're a valuable employee. If you are adding loads to the national economy, you're a valuable citizen, you know. And so actually part of our vision with Grow is that actually we take time each year to zoom right out and have that high level overview of our lives, and our calendars as well, and our priorities, I suppose, to, before we feel that the day-to-day need to be productive, before we feel that need taking charge of our calendars. And actually it's about being intentional with our calendars and being intentional with our the direction and orientation of our lives before those other stories begin to take charge of that. And we think that comes through pausing, through reflecting upon and reviewing our lives, and prayerfully considering where we want to grow in the year ahead. I don't know about you, Faith, but I feel like half the battle for me then is kind of taking the time out and kind of working out our own calendars. And I think that's kind of the habit of pausing is really important, and just sort of taking that time out, intentionally getting that high level overview of our calendars and what our lives might look like across the next year even can feel a little bit daunting. Right?
It can feel daunting,
Yeah, and I think for me, as someone who's not necessarily the most organized of chaps, have my moments, but I have to be really intentional about pausing. Otherwise, it just will not happen. And so, Faith, what can it look like to pause? What can it look like to get the important things in the diary first? We talk about big stones. Yeah, tell us about big stones.
So big stones is an idea that comes from, I don't know, it's like a myth or a legend where some professor somewhere was talking to students, and he pointed out, like, he showed them, if you have sand and then you have small stones, slightly bigger stones, and then big stones. And if you put the sand in first and then the small stones and then the slightly
into like a jar.
Into a jar, then you kind of get to the point where you actually can't fit them all in. Whereas if you put your big stones in first and then all the slightly smaller stones then fit around those, and you can actually get everything in the jar.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do it at work. We do it here, don't we? We put the big stones in the calendar first, and then all the slightly smaller things work around those. So our priorities are in place. Things like Alpha are in place before we then put in, other events.
Absolutely.
And it works really well.
It works, really well. It works for us as an organisation here at Bay Church, but it also, I think there's some really key applications in our personal lives, right? You know, for me and my wife, for example, we need to put in, when are we going to go away and, have a family holiday? We need to get that in the diary, even though it's potentially 10 months away.
That's really organised.
I know. This is the first year we've done it, and it's like it's great because I'm like, I know what we're doing in August, or at least I know the time I've got off in August in 2024. And so actually, it can be having that high level yearly overview of what our lives look like, what the direction of our lives looks like. Just means that the smaller things don't become the priority. That the day-to-day drag on our lives, the day-to-day things that shout for our attention aren't more important than the things that we actually want to value. So now I know I want to value time with my, don't take this as like I'm nailing it, because like I say, it's the first year I've done it, but I want to value quality time with my family. And so I've put in the middle of our summer, I've said, this is when we're going away, just the four of us, we're going to have a great time. everything else can go around it. So
Yeah.
if there's things that are in that week and a half period that want to try and compete for my attention, I can say 10 months out, sorry, they can't.
Yeah.
And that means that actually I've got that in place.
Yeah.
And it might be that there are things for you that you just want to get in early. And sometimes it's really easy. So things like planning Christmas, it can be, but it can be good to kind of, there can sometimes be sometimes there can be so many different people and things competing for our attention at a busy time like Christmas, that it's important to just be like, oh, who am I going to see? Who are the people we need to see as a family? Who are the people that we need to see as individuals? And get those things in first.
And sometimes I think, ironically, those big stones, if you don't put them in place first, they actually look bigger when you're trying to squeeze them in. And then you don't put them in because you're like, oh, I can't fit, like it's too big, it's too overwhelming. And then you end up not doing those things that actually were your priority.
Yes.
And I think it's just so important to get those in place. And like you say, then work around those, because otherwise they won't happen.
Oh, it's a great analogy, isn't it? The big
it is
stones
a great
thing.
analogy.
And so I think that habit of pausing is there to help us make sure that the things we prioritize, we know we need to prioritize, are actually our priorities.
Outside of the rush of trying to get everything done, right?
Exactly.
That's the point of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so good. And I suppose kind of linked to that is this habit, which we speak of in the Grow Guide, of reflecting and reviewing, taking time out. My old vicar used to say, when I was growing up in the church I was growing up in, he used to say that a change of pace and a change of place offers a change of perspective.
Ooh,
and I quite like that, and that's really stuck with me, and because I think it's true.
Yeah.
So Faith, what does it look like for you to have a kind of a change of pace or a change of place? What does it look like to reflect and review things going on in your life? What does that look like for you in the past? What does it look like for you now? What do you want it to look like?
Yeah, well, I can definitely answer what I want it to look like. I think, as I said, I am rubbish at not basing my value on productivity. And so I find it really difficult to rest and to stop. But moving forward, I would love to be able to just actually carve out time where I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. And as in, not that I'm not going to do anything, but I'm not going to do anything that is attributed to productivity, kind of. Or anything I do, I just want to do it because I'm enjoying it. But I do find it really hard to switch off. So that would be my goal, that I just carve out maybe a week or even just a weekend with Matt, where it's like, actually, we're just going to be. And we're just going to take time to look back and to look at where we want to go. We did do it once when we were in a really tricky time, and it was like a need. We needed to do it, and it was so valuable because outside of the emotion and the stress of life, we were able just to look really logically at everything and just be like, oh, this makes perfect sense now. When you're in it and you're trying to do life and make those decisions and review and all of that kind of stuff at the same time, it's nearly impossible. So it's really important, I think, to go out. And we went somewhere else. And it was like, it wasn't anywhere fancy, but you're just somewhere different. And it does give you a different perspective. Because I think all of everything that just drives your decision making normally isn't there. And it's really important to be somewhere else, I think.
And I think you really tap in there to this kind of really ancient Christian tradition, this ancient practice of retreating, going on retreat. And people have done this in different ways and forms throughout the history of the church. And so it's really important that we take time to go on retreat and kind of almost retreat to then get that high level overview, to then be ready to kind of advance again, I guess, into the things that God is calling us into. You'll have seen throughout these videos and throughout Grow is that there's no one way of doing a retreat. There's no one way of doing these habits. And I think for me, I'm someone who talks quite a lot. And I have quite a noisy household. We're a noisy bunch. So actually, a silent retreat is actually what I need in this time of life. And I love it. I absolutely love going on a silent retreat. But there have been times in my life, 10 years ago, if you'd said that to me, it would have filled me with dread to go on a silent retreat. I know other people who would be like, no, anything but a silent retreat. This is not restful for me. This is not something that's going to be restorative or rejuvenating.
And that's
for
the
me.
point of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be a time where you can go away and just kind of reflect and review and pause with God and be refilled
Yeah.
with him. And so it can, retreats don't have to look like a silent retreat. They don't have to look like even super obviously spiritual, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Faith, what would the dream retreat look like for you?
Do you know, I was just thinking about it as you're talking. I think like a paddleboarding retreat or something like that. Something where you're doing an activity that isn't too strenuous. So you definitely got mind space while you're doing it. And yet you're out. So for me, in that case, like out on the open water, like that would be amazing. I think I'd love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might do one of those.
Absolutely.
And
I think, be the change you want to see in the world, Faith. Hey, everyone, Faith's setting up a paddleboarding retreat. It's going to be amazing.
Oh my gosh.
It's going to be great. But actually, I've got friends who have been on like bread making retreats.
What?
I've got friends who've been on retreats where they go hiking up mountains in Scotland, and it's just actually let's encounter God through just being up here and just seeing his beautiful creation. There's a really beautiful principle that I can't remember exactly which rabbi it is, but he when he talks about the kind of biblical principle of Sabbath, that if you work with your mind, then Sabbath with your hands and your body. And if you work with your hands, Sabbath with your mind. And actually that idea of like actually do something that's kind of the opposite of your normal, that kind of removes you from your normal to help you go and kind of retreat. If you're in a job where you don't get to exercise your creative muscles as much as you want to, go and do something creative that really fills you with life. Go on a bread making retreat or a songwriting retreat or whatever it looks like. Or if you're in a really physically demanding job, or frankly, you're a stay-at-home parent, which is quite physically demanding.
100%.
Then go and do something that is just rest and retreat and physically rejuvenating for you. And so I think there's all these kind of principles that are kind of all flowing around that kind of indicate to us that retreat is really important. But what it looks like is it can be really really down to where you're at in life, who you are, what your personality type is. And so this can be something you can hash out with others, really discuss with others in your Bay group. And I can't wait to hear all the different kinds of retreat people are going on. But I think it's just as a yearly principle to just take that time out to get that change of pace, get that change of place. And offer you a change of perspective. And
not to feel bad about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? There's I feel like there's so much stigma with like, oh, how selfish of you to go away and do something, and I think like we just need to hammer home, like this is a godly principle.
Yeah, absolutely.
God says go to the spa.
Whoa. Receive that word, somebody. If you need to go to a spa, receive that, okay? For me, the idea of going to a spa, absolutely terrifying. So
don't go to the spa.
So I guess as well, alongside kind of pausing and taking stock of what God's doing in the middle of our moment right now, alongside reflecting and reviewing, kind of looking back at what God's done in our lives and where he's taken us, there's also that sense in which we want to grow into the future, have that kind of, I guess that moment of just considering actually who is God calling me to be in a year's time. And one of the things I want to put in place to make sure that I live faithfully to that. That I grow, that in a year's time, I'm that little bit more the person that God is making me to be. And I don't know about you, Faith, but like, I find that weird little week between Christmas and New Year's, it can sometimes be the obvious time to do this sort of thing.
Right.
No one knows what's going on. Like
nobody knows what day it is. Nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's full still
of eating
food.
Leftovers. Right. It's all just chaos. And for some reason, as a culture, we think that is the best time to make all of our New Year's resolutions about how good we want to be. The classic one is obviously, I'm going to go to the gym now.
While still wiping gravy off your face.
I'm going to go to the gym, and to accentuate how much of a better person I'm going to be once I've gone to the gym, I'm going to make myself less of a person who goes to the
Yes,
gym by
yes,
eating
yes,
loads of
yes.
food now. I think that's the
only
principle,
way.
right?
It's the only way.
But actually, I think with this principle, with this kind of this habit of growth, we want to take a moment to just stop and say, actually, it doesn't have to wait until New Year.
Yeah.
For us to begin
Yeah.
to think about what it could look like to
Yeah.
grow as people and to grow into more and more the person that God is making us to
Yeah.
be. For example, for me and my wife, we found that actually around our wedding anniversary, which almost always falls in the middle of October, half term,
Yeah.
and we found it's a really great time for us to just go away and just kind of take a moment to think and pray and give thanks to God for what he's done in the last 10 years of our marriage, but also think about what's the next year look like and what's God calling us into and what does it look like for us to challenge and encourage each other as we grow, but also like for us to grow as a family. And I think those are kind of wherever you're at. You don't have to be married to get involved with this sort of habit, right? You can take that moment and just have that. It might be that for you there's a significant time in your life, or it could be as simple as your birthday. Just like actually, hey, here's a moment to take stock, or the day after your birthday, or what if birthday's full of parties and things like that.
Obviously.
To just take a moment to just be like, hey, what does it look like for me to grow into the person that God's calling me to be? And also, what habits, what kind of things do I need to have in place in order to make sure that I'm faithful to that?
Yeah.
Who do I need to have as people around me to make sure I'm faithful to that?
Yeah.
And so I guess, what does this look like for you, Faith? What does it look like for you to take stock of things in a yearly sort of way?
I think for me, it's about allowing myself space and time to dream. I think it can be really easy just to kind of keep going through life. And I've definitely found it since working full time. It's you just keep going. You just keep going and keep going and keep going. And whether it's good or bad, you just keep going. And it can be really easy to just keep going round and round and round the years, actually, and without ever stopping. And then you get to the end of however many years and you're kind of in the same place that you were before. You're just really tired. So I think for me, that's what I need. I need time to just stop, which I've already said I'm rubbish at, but it's intentionally stop and just give myself space to just dream about, what the next year could look like, or, what I want my relationship with Jesus to be like. But it's about having space and time without limit, I think. And not like I'm going off on retreat. I don't know if I'll be back without limit, but I mean like to be able to dream without limit, without saying, oh yeah, but actually I'm not a very good prayer, or I'm not very good at this, or I can't really do that. It's just about saying, well, if all of those things were not present, what would I want? Who do I want to be? How do I want my relationship with Jesus to be? And I think those times are really powerful because they open you up and they open your eyes, and it's just without talking yourself out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and because actually that is a deeply countercultural thing to do. Yeah, because often the narrative of the story of productivity will say, "Hey, your dream has value once it's become a reality." Or if you've dreamt of starting a business and the business happens and it adds, to the nation's GDP or something like that, then now that dream has value.
Valuable,
and now actually we hear stories of the sort of founders myth of like lots of different people who like, they have a dream of starting this business, and so we love hearing those dreams once we're all living in the kind of the outworking of it. But actually to just dream without any other agenda other than to dream of what God's dream for you might be, what God's dream for your family, what God's dream for your community might be. That's a really profoundly beautiful thing, right?
Yeah, and I think it's like you say, it's about trying to hear from God in that as well. Like, what's God's dream for that too? Like, if you like, and just allowing yourself to be open and like we said, without talking yourself out of it. But I think it's really important as well how you measure success, because if you measure success by the world's measurements, then yes, that idea isn't valuable until it's made money, or that relationship isn't valuable until it's ended in marriage. I don't know, whatever. But it's like, actually, if you measure success by I've taken a step in the right direction towards Jesus, then all of those things take on a whole different value. Right? And then that success is a totally different story. And I think it's really important to almost to write down, to like put a line in the sand, this is how I'm measuring success this year. If I've gone closer to Jesus, I've succeeded. Not I've done my habit every single day because actually that's a tool in getting you to go that way.
So Faith, as we look to grow and kind of dream about what it looks like to become more and more the person that God is calling us to be, what sort of tools are available to us to begin to think about this sort of stuff?
Well, there's the spiritual health check, which is so helpful. We've done it a couple of times. It talks about systems, and circles, which
it
is
does.
Really hard to say. But that is explained in your Grow Guide.
There's more info on that in the Grow Guide. And ultimately, the Grow Guide itself is a tool for this kind of way of dreaming, of thinking more, of seeking to grow more and more into the person that God has called us to be. And ultimately, that is our heart, that is our hope behind the whole of Grow, is that through our habits, through our daily, our weekly, our monthly, and our yearly habits, that we will grow more and more into the people that God has called us to be, that we will grow in learning what it means to be disciples of Jesus, and we will live more fully in the story of God and the story that he has for us as people and as a church family.